So does your iPad work? Did you just get it today?
No, I got it.
Okay. All right, so let's open that up. So this is a bell ringer. Every day, usually every day, we'll have a question up on the board. And you'll just write the question down and then answer it. You can use your iPad if you need, but this is just reviewing information what we already talked about. So I don't know where you left off. Oh, okay. Okay. Sounds good. So, and if you need to, you can just kind of hold tight and wait to hear the response, but you can write it in your notes app. Your notes app. Yeah. So you can write it in your notes app so you can have a string of learning throughout the whole year. If you like, just make sure you do it. Chapter. Or if you want to, you can do it on like a Google Doc. That's fine too. And roll through the Google Doc. And then after the going, I usually go to my vocab. So I know you're getting in the chapter a little bit. Kind of start the chapter where we left off with where you're starting on that with vocab. And we're talking about where we want to go now. Okay. Yeah, just for today, we should play 11:30. And then one to a fun that you say 411 going there. So shut the question down. I'm going to discuss it after. Like, see what everybody's responses and then you can write down the response. Okay. You can even use your iPad to search it online if you want to help you out. Or if you want to, you can write in your notebook. A lot of people write in their notebook. Okay. It's all. What's that?
Because it's fun.
Like looking lost or like fun?
We're thinking you figure out where they
Long hair. Usually tries to do something that, like for a Halloween costume, he wanted John Wick this year, but he didn't cut his hair yet, so I don't know. Maybe he's just gonna grow it out. Well, he's getting older. Under a lot of stress. Yeah, writing it down too, that's fine. And then at the end of the week, I'll come around and check them and give you points for them. And then you'll see those questions up, most likely on the test.
Maybe it stops
We get out early.
We all want to.
That's what I've been hearing.
Really?
Yeah.
My teachers have kids.
All right, let's start here. Espionage and Sedition Acts. What we got? What do they mean? Why were they created? Who created them? What do we got? What do we got? Tanner?
Well, they were created to stop any Americans from sympathizing and supporting the Central Powers of the Russians.
Okay. All right. Okay. So mainly the Central Powers, right? Germany during World War I. Why was there such a fear, a paranoia of maybe having some German sympathizers or spies in the United States? No?
They didn't want to inside out.
Yeah. Yeah. Good job. Good job. So who was the president of the United States during World War I? We talked about him a lot. Tanner?
Woodrow Wilson.
Woodrow Wilson. Good. He was very fearful. He's very scared of what might happen if we join the wrong side. Right, the Allied powers, right? Obviously, with Great Britain and France, do we join them? I don't know, right? Or do we join the Central Powers with Germany? Okay, we talked. There's a huge immigrant population in the United States from really all over Europe in the United States, really starting into this industrial age. So if we join the wrong side, who knows what could happen? There could be a bunch of revolts or rebellions occurring all throughout the United States. So the Espionage and Sedition Acts were created to try to make sure that there would be no harm against the U.S. by our own citizens, and that there would be no sympathizers, these spies of Germany in the United States. And how did they enforce that? What did they do? We talked about a few examples, and I know I showed you a video of the Espionage and Sedition Acts. What did they do? Cassidy, remember? Yeah, good job. So jail time, fines, right? No?
They couldn't talk any other language except English or
Yeah, good job. So it's very important that they want to make sure that these people in America weren't speaking any other language. They even said that, oh, God won't hear your prayers if you're not speaking in English. If you're speaking every other language, God's not going to hear your prayers. So again, showing religion into many of these issues and these creation of this Espionage and Sedition Act. And again, this fear of this paranoia. Eddie, what do you want to add?
No, I was gonna say.
Oh, okay, all right. And even to the point where they're trying to Americanize many of these people, many of these cultures in the US. And that means really just trying to shape their culture that aligns with the United States rather than, let's say, Germany. Okay, I know we talked about it, and Eddie was talking about sauerkraut already today. Why were we talking about sauerkraut?
I don't know what it is.
Oh, okay. Cassie, what's up?
Isn't it like a German dish?
Yeah, exactly. Right. This is big in central PA. I know a lot of families around here. And the New Year, pork and sauerkraut. It's a big thing. And they changed the name to sauerkraut, sauerkraut to Liberty cabbage. Okay, it just goes to show the fear, the paranoia, what could have happened. So many people were ripped from their homes. Okay, friends, neighbors, family members even were throwing their own families under the bus if they spoke a different language or they had any type of German culture, German linkage. And yeah, many people were falsely accused, thrown in jails, literally like a witch hunt. And this would carry over, like I was mentioning, we're going to talk about the Russian Revolution today and how communism appears in Eastern Europe with Russia and how this Red Scare is going to take hold in the United States. And this is going to fall in line with the Espionage and Sedition Acts. Okay, this witch hunt, where many officials, public officials, and even how the FBI was really coming about, being created around this time to make sure that there was no fear, paranoia, these German sympathizers and maybe communist spies in the United States after World War One. So again, huge fear, huge scare after World War One, coming towards the end of it, because of really with Germany and a huge German culture here in the United States, and with the fear and spread of communism. So terms for today. There's a lot of them. I want to apologize, but hey, it's important to talk about how Russia. Yeah, I know how Russia is doing right at this time. This is going to set the stage for World War II. So I'd like you guys to remember this, moving into the 1920s and getting involved more into World War II. So we have the Russian Revolution, Tsar Nicholas II, Vladimir Lenin, Bolshevik, sounds like a curse word, proletariat, bourgeoisie, and Red Scare. I know. Do your best. Do your best. It's up on the board, so you should be able to spell it out like that, huh? Should be able to write it down. No problem.
Autocorrect.
They already know what that is.
Yeah, you should.
They
What,
learned
world
it in
history?
ninth grade world history.
Yeah.
Pay attention to that.
Why not?
Because Mr. Sharp.
Oh, stop it. I'm gonna try to find a song for you guys to remember this stuff, huh? Just like his, what is it, the Sun song? I don't know. Stuck in my head, and I never took his class. I just hear it across the hallway
All day long.
all day long.
Nobody graded us on going to.
Really?
It's a test.
Huh? What, do you have to write it out on a test or something?
They like give you some written goals with like, so you have to like fill in like.
Really? So right now, Kaylee, just write these terms down. Okay, and then you can search them on your iPad, and we'll discuss, we'll go over it, so we're all on the same page for the definition. And this is World War I vocab. We're coming towards the end. I know you missed a lot, but I have a study guide or review guide out for you, so you can maybe help you with that. Get prepared for the exam. All right, so what do we got? Russian Revolution. What do we have? You're not done. How far are you? Russian Revolution. What do we have, Eddie? What do you got?
The Russian Revolution removed Russia from the war, brought transformation for Russian empire.
All right, good. So there's a lot of issues in Russia moving into World War I, and Tsar Nicholas II, he was like the last king of Russia. And he thought, well, after that Russo-Japanese War, you remember talking about that? Remember how Russia lost that war to Japan? Remember how we mentioned that in the early 1900s? Okay, yeah, Teddy Roosevelt solved the issues, won the Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah? Okay, good. All right, so after the Russo-Japanese War and losing to an Asian country, Russia thought to bring up the spirits and spur nationalism that Tsar Nicholas II will throw Russia into World War I. Okay, remember how Serbia, they're the older brother of Serbia. Remember how they all got in line in the alliance systems? Okay, well, that didn't work out too well. And Russia had no way of feeding their own people. They weren't industrialized. Okay, so you can only imagine how this war is going to really pan out for Russia. Obviously, they couldn't get their troops to their front lines quick enough.
right? Germany was split up. That was obviously thankful for Russia. They didn't have to take the full blunt of Germany in this war. So as their troops were split up, well, this gave them a little bit of help, but at the same time, Russia was not capable of fighting this war. So they jump out. Okay, there's a huge uprising in Russia over the Czar, and they overthrow his leadership. And we'll talk today about how this is going to cause a lot of issues moving forward and how the first communist state is created, okay, with Russia, and how the Soviet Union will come about. All right, Tsar Nicholas II, I already talked about him. He was the last king of Russia, okay, in 1917, when Russia leaves the war, well, he's overthrown and he's killed by a bunch of Bolsheviks, who are people that want a communist state, a communist government, okay? And it was brutal, right? His whole family was killed, dumped in acid, and dumped down a coal mine, pretty much, where his body is nowhere to be found anymore. Pretty crazy stuff. But it just goes to show the hostility towards Tsar Nicholas II, that no one really liked him. And the reason for it is because there was no industrialization, there was no modernization. As all these European countries and the United States are advancing, Russia's still far behind. And there's no way for them to really feed their people. There's lack of food, there's constant famine. Many people died of hunger. And there was really no supplies or services that the government supplied for the people. All right, so Tsar Nicholas II wasn't favorable at all. Vladimir Lenin, what do we have for him? Kale?
He was a Russian revolutionary politician.
Yeah, good job. All right, so this guy, he was pretty much the person, the inspiration of taking Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto and applying it to Russia. He's the one who's kind of leading the charge when creating the Soviet Union, the communist government. All right. And we'll talk about him more building up to World War II. But Vladimir Lenin, he was actually in jail in Germany. And what do you think Germany did to try to push Russia out of the war? Well, they released him back into Russia. And this man, he caused a revolution and obviously pulled Russia out of the war. So in a way, this was Germany's plan of getting Russia out of the war, and it worked. It worked. So he was the one who was kind of inspiring the Bolshevik revolution, this communist revolution in Russia, to overthrow the Tsar. And it worked. All right, the Bolshevik. Sounds like a curse word. Stub your toe or something. Bolshevik. Oh. Right, Cassidy? What do you have? Yeah, good job. So the Bolshevik is just the Communist Party, okay? And these were the group of people that combined together to try to overthrow the Tsar, and they did so successfully. And they're the ones, after the Tsar was overthrown and there was somewhat of a provisional government established, they're the ones who pushed for this communist state, okay? And they outcasted any other political party that might go against their viewpoints, and to a point where they created almost a secret police to monitor the people and to make sure that they were abiding by the communist rule and their political party's agenda. If not, they're killed. If not, they're outcasted, right? So the Bolshevik Party is just the Communist Party. This was the first creation of the Communist Party in Russia, led by Vladimir Lenin. Proletariat, what do you have? Gabe, what do you have for proletariat?
Workers
Yeah,
or working class people.
yeah, good job. So I'm sure you heard about with Mr. Shutt, ninth grade. You have the working class, the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie, which is the wealthy elite class. Okay. And this is Karl Marx's view of really a Communist Manifesto, that the working class will rise up and overthrow the wealthy individuals, the business owners. Remember how we talked about the Gilded Age in chapter 1? The industrial giants, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, right? John Rockefeller, and how the progressive era took hold in the United States. Without the progressive era, who knows? We could have had revolutions like Russia went through, right? In the start of World War I. So with the progressive era, this caused a lot of movements for, I guess you'd say, the betterment of the United States without seeing a huge revolution. Were there riots? Yeah. Were there rebellions? Yeah. Were there activist movements? Of course. But at the same time, we didn't see a huge revolt against the government like in Russia because of maybe the poor treatment of these workers. And let's face it, there was a lot of poor treatment of the workers, low wages. Okay, we talked about the safety conditions in the workplace of the United States going through the industrial age. It was very poor. All right, finally, Red Scare. What do we have? Red Scare. No, what do you got? Huh? All right.
Motion of the widespread fear of centralized government.
All right, yeah, good job. Good job. So the Red Scare was this phase in American history that lasted a pretty long time, actually. And this was something that really caused a lot of fear and paranoia. This was going along with the Espionage and Sedition Act of 1917 with World War I, this fear of Germany maybe taking over the United States. Well, after some time, when we finally defeat Germany, we need to have a new enemy, and that is the communists. That is the Bolsheviks, right? This communist revolution that might spread across the Atlantic to the United States. Remember, we're accepting a lot of immigrants from Europe. A lot of these people might be assembling for communism. If we don't do something about it, who knows might happen. There might be a revolution that takes down the United States internally. And we know communism totally goes against capitalism. Okay, this doesn't work at all. Okay, and this might be a huge issue moving forward. And next chapter, we'll talk about some important stories with this Red Scare. Like I mentioned, sports teams changing their names, no longer associating the color red within their name. Okay, and it comes to a point where there's a lot of people that are targeted and killed on the streets just because they might have an affiliation with communism, right? With Sacco and Vanzetti. We'll talk about them more next chapter in the 1920s, and how this carries over into World War II, even after World War II, as the Cold War ensues. All right, here we go. So real quick, the bloody stalemate. This is Vladimir Lenin. That's a picture of Lenin right there. Okay, I'm sure you maybe seen him before, seen a picture of him before. But this was this idea where Russia, okay, we all know Germany is fighting this war, this two-front war against the Western powers, Great Britain, France, and the United States will join in 1917. But before that happens, well, Russia leaves the war. They end, okay? And a real reason was because Germany, they released Vladimir Lenin back into Russia. And we all know that Russia was going through a lot of issues, okay? They weren't industrialized. They weren't advanced. They didn't have the ability, like, let's say, Germany, France, Great Britain, even the United States, to be a modern country. They didn't have the infrastructure to carry troops long ways, far distances. Okay, they didn't have the ability to equip their troops with guns, weapons, and even food. Even their civilians had a lack of food. And it was just a poor state of chaos for Russia for a long period of time. And Tsar Nicholas II, like I said, he was trying to inspire nationalism. And the way he was going to do that was throwing Russia into a war. And if Russia comes out on top, what do you think is going to happen? Well, nationalism is going to be inspired even more. Russia might claim more land and might accept more industrial values. We all know that didn't work out too well. Even though Germany's army was split, Russia was still not modernized. So this was a bloody stalemate on the Eastern Front. And because the people weren't fed, because the people didn't have support, there was a huge uprising in Russia inspired by Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks, the Communist Party, the communist inspired group, to overthrow the Czar. And that's exactly what happened. So Russia goes through this communistic state. Okay, they go actually through two revolutions as they're accepting communism as their form of government. And as they're rolling through that communistic state, sooner or later, Russia is going to actually build up to more of an industrial power. But that's not going to happen until Joseph Stalin. All right, we'll talk about Stalin more when we get to World War II. But he's going to force industrialization in Russia. He's going to force modernization in Russia to a point where it's going to kill millions and millions of his own people. And many people look at Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin as the two biggest terrors the world's ever seen, and Mao Zedong, okay, of China. Okay, we'll talk about those three men here soon enough. But here's the start of really communism in the world and how it's accepted in Russia and creating the Soviet Union. So the Bolsheviks, again, they're fighting for the proletariat. They're fighting for the working class individuals. And this has inspired a lot of people through this poor state, these poor working conditions, these poor low wages, a lack of food and a lack of resources the government's providing for the people to overthrow the Czar. And that's exactly what happens. And this provisional government that's created, it's called the Duma. I'm not going to really get into that too much. That's really getting in detail about the revolution. It's really not accepted by the people as much just because the Bolsheviks had so much power. Okay, many people wanted a huge change. They wanted equality amongst all groups of people. They didn't want to have a wealthy elite class and a lower working class, right? So this divide caused a lot of problems to a point where many of the individuals in Russia wanted to see this communist government take suit and take place. And that's exactly what happened. So as Russia's leaving the war, the United States is joining, right? And you got to think, if you're France and Great Britain losing the Eastern Front, losing Russia as an ally, that's going to cause some problems, right? Germany's now going to equip all their forces that were on the Eastern Front to the Western Front to attack and probably beat Great Britain, France. And we all know what happens. The United States does join. Luckily, if the US didn't join, who knows what could have happened, right? Germany probably would have had the upper hand, had the advantage, just because Russia leaving the war. And Germany was smart by it, right? They knew that they needed to end that two-front war. And the best way to do it was releasing Vladimir Lenin to cause this communist revolution in Russia. And once he did that, well, Russia left the war really within months. There was a huge state of anarchy in Russia. The Czar was overthrown. Like I mentioned, he was killed. His whole family was killed. And communism was accepted in Russia. And this is going to carry over, like I said, into World War II, even after World War II with the Cold War. Okay, we won't see an end of this really up until 1991, when the Cold War ends. That's really not too long ago, right? So again, with the Red Scare, I wanted to mention that real quick because that caused a lot of issues in the United States. Not only were we fighting against Germany, right? And as that war was coming to an end, the biggest threat now was communism, right? Are we going to see a communist revolution in the United States? Who knows? So we need to make sure that we can stop these assemblies, these grouping of people talking about communism and maybe potentially trying to overthrow the country. And there's a lot of court cases dealing with the Espionage and Sedition Acts with communism. And there's a lot of different tensions being created all throughout the US, a lot of paranoia, a lot of fear that who knows what could happen. There could be a rebellion that topples everything that we created here in the US. And with the Espionage and Sedition Acts, many people say that's taking away people's freedoms, taking away people's rights. But can you really blame Woodrow Wilson with World War I happening, this huge immigrant population in the United States from Germany, and now here the Red Scare? Again, it's kind of one of those flip of a coin things, right? It depends what your viewpoints are on it. And if you're actually living through the era, maybe you're for it. But whenever you're going against someone's freedoms, it's hard to really approve of these types of acts. So again, that's why I had to bell ringer the Espionage and Sedition Acts, because that's really bringing back up with the Red Scare. And we'll talk about the Red Scare more next chapter with, like I said, Sacco and Vanzetti, and with many of these other examples of how we're trying to disassociate ourselves with communism to a point where we're changing sports teams' names like the Cincinnati Reds. Oh, it's association with communism. We got to get rid of the name. Really? It's a little crazy, don't you think? But again, that was a time period. Washington football team. Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right, is there any questions, guys? With the Red Scare, with the Russian Revolution. So again, now in 1917, Russia leaves the war. That's the biggest thing here I want you guys to remember. And the reason for it was really the creation of a communistic state. Is this going to cause issues for the United States eventually? Oh yeah, for sure. Right, as the Red Scare is pursuing right now in the 1920s, okay, and moving up into World War II. And even after World War II, guess who our rival is? Guess who our enemy? The Soviet Union, Russia, right, with communism. Okay. All right, so that's what I got for today. Hopefully everything was okay. I know that first day back from break's a little tough. We'll end it here now.